Okay, hi, my name is Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic. It's great to be here. It's good to see all you guys. It's good to see my mentor and muse, Kelly, here. You know, she was so fantastic and it helped me at the last meeting, you know, and I was praying that you were going to be here. So it's good to see you here, sweetheart. God bless you. I mean that. I was looking forward to it. I'm glad you're here. So I'm gonna listen. This is my experience. My experience. You understand what I'm saying? My experience. I haven't found necessary to have a drink in a few years. I'm in my 42nd year of recovery. I'm 73 years old, and this is all my experience. So if I say something to offend you, whenever you're disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with you. So check it out with your sponsor. Put me on your flipping list. You know what I mean?
I do.
Russell said this. I can't believe that bullshit. You know. And I was on a meeting this morning, and I go to like 3 or 4 meetings. I love the meetings, and I can't remember exactly how the meeting got there or whatever it is, but somehow we ended up talking about, which I'll probably do sometime tonight, about growing up in AA and how your sponsors treat you and everything like that. And you know, I know we're all different people, and sponsoring people and how you talk to them is an art. It's really not a science. There's no cookie cutter. But I seem to somehow get sponsors who I loved. I adored them. But I had a tendency to get these sponsors where whenever they would sort of share anything with me, any wisdom, they always start off with hitting me over the head with a baseball bat. You know what I mean? Like, you know, that's just the way they were. You know, it was. You know, like if I said to Ray O'Keefe, I'm not feeling good, he'd say, hey, this may be the best you ever feel, you know, and, you know, stuff like that. You know as much about life as his dog knows about his father, and why don't you just shut up, you know, and, you know, like when I told my sponsor I'm doing everything and it's not working, he says, you're probably one of the rare ones. Rarely does it seem to see it bad. It probably is not going to work with you. You got to leave, you know, and yeah, it was like they had no compassion whatsoever. And so I had somebody sort of like take a little crosstalk argument. And he says, no, you got to love alcoholics. You got to love them. You got to love them. And well, first of all, I knew they loved me, so maybe that's why it worked. I don't know, but I this whole idea of, and I believe that. I've actually even said, you know, treat everybody like they have a broken heart, because they probably do, and I do try to love on alcoholics. But I don't know why we're, you know, they have this thing. They call it an Al-Anon. I think it's an A. It's tough love. You know, I mean, I don't know, the guys I was brought up with, they would just slam me all the time, and because there's some sort of deal, some sort of understanding we have, I guess. Everybody has this understanding that if you're like nice to alcoholics and treat them kindly and with love, they'll sort of come around. When I don't know how long you guys have been here, when all evidence is absolutely to the contrary. You know, I mean, the only time I've ever seen anybody move from here to there in alcohol, they get comfortable, and the only time they move from here to there is when they get one leg amputated, or the wife leaves them, or they go to jail, or something horrendous happens, you know? I mean, the only way they get sober is something horrendous has to happen, something painful. The only reason, and once we get in here, we stop drinking, and we get to the not drinking point. But we get this point where we're not drinking, we're feeling okay, but we're nuts. And the only way to move from nuts to maybe a little bit, you know what I mean, is like you have to have the rug pulled out from you. You got to lose everything. I mean, the evidence is to the contrary. The new perspective is based on repeated humiliations, the final crushing of our self-sufficiency. You know, pain is the touchstone. I mean, the evidence with alcoholics is, for whatever reason, the only way we move is if we get crushed. And that's just the way, and that's if you're 10 years sober, if you're 40 years sober, something's got to happen. The heart attack's got to happen. The wife's got to leave. The husband's got to leave. Bad shit has got to happen to you before you listen. And you know, people worry about, well, you're hurting this guy's feelings. I used to say, why don't you get out of here? Why don't you go drink? You worry about hurting these people's feelings. There is absolutely nothing I could say to an alcoholic here designed to hurt their feelings so maybe they wake the hell up. There's nothing I can do here that's worse than what will happen to them out there if they don't get it. You know what I mean? Because I may say something to you and you may be pissed off at me, you may think about me for a week, you may want to kill me, my dog and everything like that. But whatever I say to you, you ain't going to jail. You know what I mean? You're not going to kill somebody and charge for vehicular homicide. Out there, the way you learn the lesson is you go to jail for 15 years. And that's how you learn the lesson. That's how you learn. So you want to learn the lessons in here. That's what you want to learn. And I'm probably saying this because it's going to have something to do with the God thing. It's supposed to be on the third step. I'll be all over the place, but I want, since all I do is talk about God, I'm on the 12th step, I'm going to talk about God. 6th step, I'm going to talk about God. The whole thing's about God. But now, since it's the third step, I'm like allowed to do that in AA. Generally, you're not allowed to talk about God, but it's third step, so I'm allowed to talk about God. So this is going to be even worse. I'm going to be even worse than I usually am. But if I'm going to talk about God, I've just got to talk about what's going to move you into the position where you're going to have to go. I'm just going to have to talk about that because the chapter agnostic says, if a mere code of morals, let's say, do the next right thing, or a better philosophy of life, like good orderly direction, would have helped us, we've been this sober a long time ago. But these things don't really help us in the long run because we lack the power to do the next right thing forever. We lack the power to do good orderly direction forever. Somewhere along the line, there's this great line. Well, it's not really a line. I don't want to say I made it up because I got it. One of the things that happens is you study this stuff long enough, you internalize it, you have it working in your lives, and you sort of like, I don't know how to say it, you take what's in the big book and you sort of like digest it in your own life. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to read a couple things to you, but one thing I'm going to read, I think I'll do it right now, it's out of order, is something I just wrote this morning. And I'm just going to say the statement, and it actually comes from a couple of paragraphs that I linked together. I've actually, what happens is you sort of like connect the dots. And there's a paragraph after the 5th step. Now, everybody knows the 6th step, right? The 6th step says the 6th step is the step that separates the men from the boys. Now, let me give you a clue. 95% of AA is boys. Spiritual kindergarten, rarely going to move from that position, going to hang on to their boyhood and their bullshit, and they're not going to be sincere about this thing. And we all sort of start off that way in the not drinking club and don't talk so much about the God thing. I don't want to hear it. I didn't come here and all that stuff. 95% of AA is going to be the boys. That's why most people don't make it past 20 years. They drink somewhere or something and go out. And about 5% make it through that filter and they come to men, and they're the ones that maybe hit 40, 50 years, stuff like that kind of stuff. And they don't, they prosper. I'll put in the big book, it says, you want a reason to do the God, I'm going to give you a reason to do the God thing. It says we're now on the new basis, trusting and relying upon God. We're now on the new basis, trusting and relying upon God. We never apologize for God. Never ashamed about God or talking about God. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. It says it again. Instead, we let him demonstrate in our lives what he has done for us. Like Bill Wilson said, the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease. I can keep talking about it, talk about it and telling other people. And then you know what the next line after that? The next line is this. At once, we outgrow fear. So I know I'm talking to a group of alcoholics. So I know you're all scared out of your fucking minds. I know because I know my old idea used to be that nobody feels the way I do. Nobody could understand me. And I know for the first 10 and 20 years of my sobriety, I was scared shitless, although I wouldn't let on. Sometimes I wouldn't even tell myself. I was scared about the money. I was scared about would you like me. I was scared about what people. I was scared about a lot of shit. A lot of shit. And you can't necessarily tell when people are scared in AA. They may act out with anger. They may act out with depression. They may act out, but it's all a bunch of fear, which is the corrosive thread that runs through our lives. That's not an opinion. That's the dis-ease, okay? So you need to try to examine what your life would be like right now if you were never afraid? You need to examine what your life would be like now if you were never afraid. Not that you were rich, but you were never afraid of not being rich or losing something, never afraid of what people thought about you. If that promise that they say in that fictional book, AA, never happened to you. You know that promise that says we'll lose fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us? You got to imagine what your life would be like if that became true in your life. Well, that truth, that thing that happens, and I'm telling you, there's concrete underneath those lily pads. It happens. That truth that happens, which is different than not drinking. Being rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence, experiencing much of heaven and having peace. And the great fact is this and nothing less, that God's the central factor of our lives. That's different than not drinking. Not drinking is what I've recovered from. I've recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. That's not being it. I'm not going to drink today and then you're drunk. I'm not going to drink today and then you're drunk. I'm not going to drink today and then you're drunk. You can't stop drinking. That's hopeless states of mind and body. Not having fear in your life and living a life of joy is a whole different animal, which is not even close to prevalent in AA. Very, very, very rare. I mean, it just is. That's just the way it is. And there's a line in the, after you do the fifth step, before the step that separates the men from the boys. Now the sixth step, you know what that's about? That's about God. It's about, you know what it's about? It's the third step to the power of 10. The third step is you turn your will, you come to, what is it? You make a decision to turn your will. I mean, what's that? It's like bullshit. I mean, I don't want to say it's bullshit. It's a big deal. Everybody will say that's terrible. Yeah, you get down on your knees, right? And you say the third step prayer. I give my life, blah, 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 whatever it is. And I haven't memorized it, but, I did it. I got on my knees. I said the prayer, which was a good thing, and I'll go into that, and then I got off my knees and business as usual. Worried about the money. If I was I convinced that there was a God? Was I convinced? Did I even know God existed? Did I even know what he looked like? Did I know what his image was or what I was wanting? Did I know anything? Nothing. Here's what I did. I knew that I didn't want to drink, and they told me how to do this. So I did it, and I said, well, maybe there's God, maybe there is a God, whatever it is, I'll do the step. You know what I mean? And I became willing to at least hold hands. I didn't get into arguments about God or anything like that. I sort of went with the flow. You with me? Which is what you sort of do like a rabbit's foot. You know what it says in the seventh step? You can have actually avid and earnest beliefs in God, but they remain barren. Barren. Because he's not the central factor of your life. I mean, there's a big difference between making a decision and making a sincere decision, which comes later on, to grow in the image and likeness of your Creator. And even to know what his image is. Because if you don't know what God's image is, see, the sixth step, it separates the men from the boys, is you want to get rid of anything that keeps you from God and knowing God and thirsty for God. It's like the real deal, you know what I mean? And most people never make it there. Because they're worried about whether, if you talk like Russell, they'll laugh at you or they'll roll their eyes. They're worried about what other people think about them. And what they don't realize is, to the extent that people stay away from God and don't talk about God and don't promote God and don't love God because they're worried about what people think about them, what they don't understand is they will never lose the fear of what other people are thinking about them. You see, that's the problem. You see, to get where most people will never get, you've got to be willing to go where most people will never go. So if God is your image and you have an image of God and you know where you are and he's the most important thing in your life, then why would you even worry about what some guy's thinking about you today? I mean, he's not even paying your Visa bill. You know what I mean? And the bottom line is when your life revolves around people and things in this world, you can never lose the fear. So basically, you're stuck in the fear and the lust for things and the worshiping things and the craving things because you refuse to crave God. And if you think you crave God but you're not talking about him, you're absolutely wrong. Because what you really do is what you're really saying, I crave God, but I'm more worried about what people think about me. Because you're not willing to sacrifice that part of you that is worshiping other people and their thought. Because you have that other problem alcoholics have, the problem of feeling worthless. Deep down inside, you're worthless because you don't really believe in God. You don't believe God loves you. You don't believe you're a child of God. You don't believe He's the Father and you're the children. You believe what you are is what other people think about you, or what kind of car you're driving and stuff like that. And it's a crummy way to live your life, but you don't even know you're living it because that's what you're doing. You with me? So I mean, I could actually stop the talk right there, but I won't because I have some other stuff I want to tell you. But what I'm telling you, let's make believe, just for the hell of it, that what I'm saying is the truth. That would be a problem. You know what I mean? That'd be a problem. So you could stay sober, physically sober, for 20, 30 years. So right after the fifth step, there's this line, and I haven't got it memorized, but I wrote down something about it, where it says after the fifth step, but before the sixth step, we go into a room, we sit quietly, and we ask ourselves these questions. Are we building the structure properly? You know what I'm talking about? It says, have we done everything we're supposed to do? Have we cemented? Do we have the cement so that the foundation is steady? So what do you think they're talking about by the cement? The invisible glue. What do you think is the invisible glue that keeps people sober past 20, 30, 40 years doing this? God. You know, what do you think that invisible glue is? And you know, the sixth step says that what the sixth step is really about, it's about repeatedly doing whatever you have to do to grow in the image and likeness of your Creator, which will take you a lifetime. That's what your focus is. If you've done that, that's where you know you're a man, because all you do is think about God. All you do is think about God. Driving up here, we're listening to hymns. You know, we're listening to hymns all the way up for an hour and a half. We're listening to hymns. And Jim said, we're listening to How Bright Thou Art, because that's what I do. You know, I just listen to hymns and all the time in my house. I'm listening to stuff like that. And hanging around with people that are talking about stuff like that, because those are the people I crave to hang around with. And I looked at Jim and I said, Jim, don't be telling me you can't think about God all the time. Don't be telling me you can't do that. So let me read you something, just for the hell of it. You know, this is... If I have not cemented the foundation of recovery, after the fifth step, with the invisible glue, the glue that's going to hold you steady. Don't drink and go to meetings, ain't the invisible glue. If I have not cemented the foundation of recovery with the invisible glue, by making God the central fact of my life. I say that because, this isn't my opinion, because the big book says the great fact for us, and I'm going to include you in the us thing if it's okay, because I think you're us. The great fact for us is this and nothing less, that our Creator, God, has become the central fact of our lives. So I'm going to assume if you're doing this thing, that's the deal, okay? I'll make it personal to me so it doesn't have anything to do with you. If I have not cemented the foundation of recovery with the invisible glue, I get, by making God the central fact of my life, that's the glue, that's on page 75. After some sobriety, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, after some physical sobriety, I start thinking. I subconsciously start thinking. Subconsciously start thinking. In other words, you remember the fact on the second, you remember we're insane, right? That means alcoholics are not well. We don't put the plug in the jug and all of a sudden we're sane. We've got some sort of something in our mind which is always there. All we get is a daily reprieve, and we're insane. And part of our delusion and our insanity is that we're going to beat this thing by our brain. We're going to smart our way out of this thing. You know, Roland Hazard, now knowing the inner workings of my life, drinking was impossible, blah, blah. And then, nevertheless, he was drunk in 3 weeks, we're going to think it's a brain thing. We're not going to understand that remember what chapter 8 of Gnostic says? It says, "A mere code of morals, better philosophy with the lack of power started to level." We don't have the power to do it. Even with our brain, we don't have that. Therefore, we wrote a book where, of course, we're going to talk about God. He's the power. And then says, here's the problem. Alcoholics get mad. They don't want to hear about God. That's the disease. Somebody says to you, somebody starts saying shit about God and about people talking about God. What they're saying to you, you don't understand what they're saying. They're saying, I'm not sober. I'm not sober. I refuse to lose my resentment over the Catholic Church. I hate God because of what my father did to me. I refuse. I'm defiant. I am unwilling to go that far. They're saying, I haven't had a drink in 20 years, but I'm a fucking nut. Stay away from me. I might as well be drunk, because I will be soon. Or if I'm not drunk, I'll be unhappy as shit. I'll be miserable. So stay away from those guys, okay? After some sobriety, physical sobriety, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, since I'm sober, but I don't believe in God, he's not the central fact of my life, I subconsciously start thinking that I'm doing it. That I'm doing it. You know what it says? You can't rest on your laurels, because we start thinking, I'm sober 20 years, I'm doing it. On my own power. That should scare you if you know anything about the first step. And somehow I have the power to stay sober because I'm smart and I go to meetings and whatever it is, and live without God. And that, my friend, is the beginning of the slip. That's the beginning of the end. That's where not drink and go to meetings guys go to die. That's the chasm. Now, it may not happen for 10 years. It may not happen for 20 years. But that's where the slip begins. It begins when you forget the God thing and you don't do the 6th step and you think you're okay because you got 10 years or 15 years and you don't need the God thing. And you rest on that. Now, I thought I'd just tell you that. You don't have to believe that. But I just thought I'd tell you that so I'd mind screw you. See, because now it's in there. And you can say he's an asshole and I don't believe it. But it's in there so you can never get it out again. Now you can't stop thinking about it, you see? Because if there's anything I want to do, I want to plant these seeds. Even with the guy who hates me the most for saying it, okay? So now I got I'm going to give you some stories, true stories, which has something to do with the 3rd step, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I think it does. But there's true stories about my... So, one story, which is a true story, which is not my story, but it is my story, because it's a story that I was told many, many years ago in a Bible study by a guy, and it hit me, and I said, holy crap, that's Alcoholics Anonymous, that's the whole deal. And I started telling this story that I heard in Bible study. I believe that when I was 11 years sober, because it so told me this is my deal, this story, and and it's a true story. You can look it up on Wikipedia, whatever it is. And I'm going to try to tell it fast because we got a lot to go through, and I got a lot of other stuff to tell you about. So this is a story about the miners. Actually, Cindy, if she's on this thing, she's on Zoom, she said, will you tell the story about the miners and Leo? So I'm going to tell both stories. But so the story is called, it's about, I call the miners. That's like coal miners, like gold miners. So in the 1860s, right after the Civil War, there was the 2nd largest gold strike in the history of the West. It was up in, anybody remember Bonanza? We got people old enough for Bonanza. What was that? What was it called? Silver City? What was that? Virginia City. Okay, now, up there was the biggest gold strike. And you got to forgive me because of the age. I used to know all the names. Henry Featherweather. I used to know the names of the people. I used to know the place. I think it was called Bannon, Montana, or something like that. You can look it up in Wikipedia. And they found the hugest gold strike and silver at a place called Grasshoppers Creek. But anyway, the way it worked is like this. There was gold in the Black Hills, which basically the Indians had. And white men were not allowed to go into Black Hills because it was Indian territory. That's where the gold was. So about 300 miners went from there to the back hills and there were about 7 guys. There was a Henry Fairweather and another guy named Edgar. It was like 7 guys were trailing behind, and they got captured by Crow Indians. And they eventually got let go. 6 of them got let go. One was a half-breed and he stayed behind. 6 of them got let go and they were going back to Bannock, Montana. And on the way back, they camped at a place called Grasshoppers Creek. And so they're camping at this place called Grasshoppers Creek. And they're sitting there, and Henry Fairweather or Edgar was hitting some rim rock or something. I don't even know what rim rock is, but they were hitting it. This is the story. This is the truth. And they found gold. And so they stayed there for a few hours, and they're hitting this thing. They found like about, I don't know, $1,000 worth of gold. It's like going in your backyard and finding, $20,000, $30,000. And they realized that they had hit the mother lode. They had hit, can you imagine, these 6 guys, they had hit the mother lode. But the problem was, they didn't have any tools. They had to get back to Bannock to work the claim, because if they didn't work the claim, somebody would jump the claim or take over the claim, or, they had to work it. So they made a solemn vow. Now here's the vow. It says, now I was told a long time ago as a lawyer, Santos Trafficante once said, the only way to keep a secret amongst 3 men is 2 have to die. That's what Santos said. But in any event, so they make a solemn vow that nobody's going to say anything to anybody. So they go into Bannock, Montana, and they buy all the tools and they buy all the stuff and they get it all and they load it up, and they made a plan they're going to meet at the old oak tree outside Bannock. So they go to meet at the old oak tree, and all of a sudden like 300 miners are following them. So Fairweather knows, he says, somebody spilled the beans. You know what I mean? So he goes to the lead guy with the miners, and the guys are following him. And he says, who told you? He says, nobody told us. He says, nobody told you? He says, no, we could see it in your eyes. He says, we could see it. We knew you had hit the mother lode. In Outlaws number 3, what's his name? Bill Dotson says this line. He said, I was sober. And he said, Bill Dotson was the man on the bed. It says, came to believe. Have you ever seen that part? He said, I knew there was something more, something I hadn't got, something I knew a person ought to have, some sort of release, some sort of happiness that I knew a person ought to have. I was trying to find the answer, and Bill Wilson was in my house, and he said to my wife, Henrietta, Henrietta, the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease that I got to keep talking about it and telling other people. He says, I got the answer. He called it the Golden Text. There's a group down here called the Golden Text. DVB started. He says he gave all credit to God. He believed in God. It was the focus of his life, and he gave all credit for everything that happened to God. And that was the Golden Text. You know what I mean? And he had, like with the mind, you could see it in his eyes. He had more than physical sobriety. He had something more than physical sobriety. He was like gone, like Dr. Bob was gone, like St. Francis of Assisi was gone. We all read the St. Francis. He was like in a different deal. He was doing it. It was like me playing golf against Tiger Woods playing golf. We're playing the same game, but we're not playing the same game. There's a different thing, you know what I mean, going on? And so the truth is, the reason why it's like my life is the only thing I can think of in my life as to why I'm here. It's not because I did the steps. Everybody does the steps. Everybody does the steps, for God's sakes. We got people here 10 years, 15, everybody does the list, and all that sort of stuff. If the steps kept you sober, we'd have 50 people in here right now at 40 years. A's been around for 90 years. How come I got 40 years? How many other people have 40 years? One other guy. So if A's been around for 90 years, how come we only have 2 guys here with 40 years? And you're lucky you got 2 guys with 40 years. And you start doing 30, then you'll have 3 or 4 guys, and everything, it goes down. And there's like nothing between like 20 and 30. It's like a vast wasteland. I know because I know how many chips and medallions. I know what's going on. So maybe if you doesn't train, go to meetings. How come people drop off from meetings? What's the glue that said, what's going on there? And so what I realize is one of the reasons I'm still here is because I've always hung out with the miners. I've always wanted what the miners have. I never wanted what you have. I'm not saying you personally. I never wanted what you had. I wanted what the miners. I was always able to recognize the miners. So I'm 4 months sober, and my sponsor, Bob Sullivan, takes me to the keynote meeting. And at the keynote meeting, there's a guy speaking named Al Kennedy. And he does a 1 hour talk. He's talking, he's doing his thing. It's a 1 hour talk. And I'm sitting there, I'm like transfixed by this guy, because it's like they said about Jesus. He says he talks with authority, not like the scribes. He was talking like he knew, you know what I mean? He wasn't like, well, I got to read something. Yeah, he wasn't. This guy was like talking from the heart, and he was excited, and he was happy, and he was loving on people, and he was, man, you couldn't look at this guy and not say, I was like Bill Dotson, I want what they have. I knew there was something. I said, I want what this guy has, and man, this guy's, Al Kennedy had like 40 years, and he was talking. He had probably my age or a little bit older or something, and so he left. He finished, everybody claps, and he leaves, okay? So I say to my sponsor, who never listened to me anyway, I say, what group does he belong to? I'd like to hang out. I'd like to hang out with him. Because it says if you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, I wanted what he had. I wanted Al Kennedy. I wanted that. Whatever he had, I wanted that. And so my sponsor says this to me. He turns to me, he says, he's dying. He's dying. Well, it was not unusual that my sponsor never listened to me. No, I'm just telling you, it's just the way it is. I had a long talk with him about how I was broke and I had no money and I had nothing and I needed help and I didn't know what to do. And he looked at me and he says, yeah, I got the answer for you. I think it's about time you started making coffee for the group. So you got to understand something. And so I knew immediately he wasn't listening to me. You know what I mean? I was having a conversation with him. So it wasn't unusual for my sponsor. He only had 15 years. He wasn't that bright. He didn't graduate college like me. So it wasn't unusual for my sponsor to say stupid shit. You know what I mean? And so I said, I want to know what group this guy belongs to. And he's saying he's dying. And so I said, what do you say? I said, no. He says, I'm talking about the guy who just did the meeting, that Al Kennedy guy. He says, yeah, he's dying. I said, no, the guy who just did the meeting, Al Kennedy. Russell, he's dying. What do you mean he's dying? He just did the meeting. He says, Russell, he's dying of cancer. He has 6 months to live. I said, that guy? I said, he's dying of cancer. He has 6 months to live. I said, but he didn't say anything about dying. I was sitting there telling people that I had a hangnail. You know what I mean? I got a hangnail. It's killing me, I didn't sign up for this shit, Yeah, you're laughing. You don't know what it's like. He says, Russ, he's got 6 months to live. He's dying. I don't know what to tell you. And 6 months later, he was dead. 20 years after that, his grandson got a vehicular homicide, and I represented him in court. Funny how things come around. He's got 10 years sobriety now. But in any event, but you see, Al, from that point on, little seeds, from that point on, although I wouldn't have said it then, I wouldn't even known how to say it then or give this talk then. I can tell you right now, physical sobriety just left me. I wanted Al Kennedy sobriety. I didn't understand Al Kennedy sobriety. I had no idea how you get Al Kennedy sobriety. I wanted whatever that shit is that you get where you could be dying of cancer and be happy and helping people. I wanted that deal. You understand what I'm saying? Like Bill Dotson wanted the Bill Wilson deal. I wanted Al Kennedy sobriety. I had never seen anything like that. But here's what I knew about Al Kennedy sobriety. I knew that it existed. It wasn't just something in the big book. I knew that there were some people in here that had hit the mother lode. It wasn't put the plug in the. I knew there were people here that hit the mother lode. And so I chased after all those people. I chased after those people. My second sponsor, he's the one who handed me Sermon on the Mount. My third sponsor, John Glenn, who was a Baptist preacher, who I met him in Bible study. Because somebody told me to do that, and I did that. I balked at it, but I ended up doing it because he said, you need more. You need more. So I was willing to go more, and I met my third sponsor who had 55 years. That's the guy that I'd go to Denny's restaurant, and we'd be eating, and he'd say, what are you doing? He says, I'm eating. He says, Russell, he says, can't eat. We got to give thanks first. And he would bow his head, and I would bow my head, and I'm looking around to see who's looking at me. I think he's going to say, God, thank you for the food, and then that's it. He's saying, Lord Jesus, thank you for the food. Thank you for having Russell here. Thank you for Russell's wife. And thank you for my wife and his wife, and God bless his children, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying, holy fucking shit, unbelievable. I'm looking around to see who's looking at me and everything like that, and he's like shit. He couldn't care less. He's just thanking the Lord, and you know what happens when and he had like 55 years. You know what happens when you hang around with people like that? When those are the people you're looking for, and you start hanging around with this, you know what happened? You start becoming that. You get an image. God's no longer like a fuzzy thing with you, or like love, or the universe, or something like that. You know what I mean? You get an image of who he is and what he is, and quite frankly, he's very much described in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Who God is and what he is completely described in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Absolutely described. His characteristics, who he is, what he wants me to be. He better be described, because it says above everything, we must get rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And he says, and he will give us everything once we make a sincere decision for him, which is different than Thursday. Sincere, he will give us everything we need if we stay close to him and perform his works well. So you better know who he is, and you better know what his work is for you, because he's got work made out. He's got work for you. I'm at work. This is my job. Now the good thing is, I happen to love my job. You see, I love my job. Because I love my God, and he loves me, and I think that I just want to do what he wants me. I don't worry about what you want me to say. I'm not saying, well, I wonder if they'll like this God thing. I mean, I'm talking a little bit about, I think I mentioned Jesus. I don't know what I did. I don't think that way. I don't think, let me give them what they want. Because I know that most of you don't want this, or didn't come here to hear this. But I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to tell you my story and who I am, and I have the courage to do it because my focus is on him. And this is a step series. And what I'm supposed to do is tell my experience, strength, and hope. So if I don't tell you this because I'm worried about what you're thinking about me, then what I'm doing is I'm working a fraud on you. I'm deliberately hurting you, and the reason I'm hurting you is so that I can make sure that you don't hate me. So in order for me to be accepted, what I'm doing is I'm prostituting myself. I'm not going to prostitute myself. I did that for many, many years. I'm not going to be what you want me to be. I'm going to be what I am. Because personally, quite frankly, I am who I am. And I've tried to be who you wanted me to be. But quite frankly, I do a better me than anybody in the universe. There's only one of me, and I'm the only one, and I do me better than I do anybody else. And whenever I do somebody else, somebody always gets mad, and I try to pull them and say, no, you don't understand. This isn't really me. I was trying to be somebody else, and you're hating me, but you're not really hating me. You're hating the guy I was trying to be, and this way I can just be me, and then what can happen is the people that hate me, but that's okay, because at least they hate me. But the people that love me, and they love me. It's not somebody I'm trying to be to impress them. Does that make any sense? Well, it makes sense to me. That's the important thing. You see, and then I don't have to sit around like some sort of schizo, So one day, let me see. So one day I got some time. So one day I'm driving along in the car, and so this is like beyond getting down on your knees. This is like beyond getting down on your knees and saying third step prayer and then getting up and saying, thank you very much, I think I'll go to a meeting. Do you understand? This is like the real third step. This is the real deal. Okay? And we'll get into this more and more as time goes by, and we'll get to 6th step and 7th step. So one day I'm driving in my car, and because what happens is if you don't get this right, if you don't understand this and you don't get this right, nobody gets away with anything here. because the disease is just that strong. And it's not the drinking. The drinking's but a symptom of the disease. The disease centers in your mind, not your body. So you can never run away from the disease. You can be sober 40 years and it'll kill you. 30 years and 20 years and you'll drink again because you think subconsciously you're safe, and you're not safe. You're never safe unless there's only one thing that can keep you safe. And they talk about it in the big book all over the place. We're on a new basis. It says God is either everything or he's nothing. What is your decision going to be? There's no middle of the road solution. Half measures avail you nothing. What do you think they're talking about, these guys? I don't know whether you know this, but we talk about, you read that book where it says thoroughly followed. Yeah, doesn't the big book, 1939, they wrote a book. A was started in 1935. 1935. The big book was written in 1939. It says, rarely have we seen a person fail as thoroughly followed our path. Thoroughly do what we did. You do what we did, you'll get what we got. Let me tell you what they weren't doing between 35 and 39. They weren't reading the big book. Now listen, this is advanced shit. You know what I mean? And some of you guys won't get this. You know what I mean? Some of you guys won't get this because it's really advanced. So let me tell you what they were doing. Would you like to know what they were doing?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
On the other hand, we were taking them upstairs and getting them on their knees to surrender, which I felt was a very important part. The surrender was more than important, it was a must. Bobby, who came to AA in February of 1937, recalled that after 5 to 6 days in the hospital, i.e., don't talk about God, you'll kill the newcomer, who came to AA in 1937, recalled that after 5 or 6 days in the hospital, when you had indicated that you were serious, they say in the big book, nobody has sunk this low, so low that they won't be welcomed with open arms in Alcoholics Anonymous if they mean business. When you're serious, and they had an interesting way of finding out whether you're serious. They would tell you to get down on your knees by the bed and say a prayer to God, admitting that you were powerless over alcohol and your life was unmanageable, or furthermore, you had to state that you believed in a higher power who would return you to sanity. There you can see the beginning of the 12 steps, he said. We call that the surrender. They demanded it. You couldn't go to an AA meeting until you did it. If by accident you didn't make it in the hospital, you'd have to make it in the upstairs bedroom of the Williamson's house. That's what you had to do if you wanted to go to a meeting. If you wanted, in other words, you were doing the third step before you went to your first meeting, or you weren't going to. How many guys have ever heard somebody say, "Well, if they told me to do that, I would have walked out of here"? Guess what? They would have kicked you out. You wouldn't have gone to a meeting. That's what you had to do. It says, Dorothy S.M. recalled the 1937 meetings when the men would all disappear upstairs and all of us women would be serious, nervous, worried about what was going on. About a half an hour or so, down would come the new man, shaking, white, serious, and grim, and all the people who were already in AA would come trooping down after him. They were pretty reluctant to talk about what had happened, but after a while they would tell us they had a real surrender. That's what they were doing. There was no doubt when you joined AA what you were involved in. This is on page 143 of Conference Approved Material, Dr. Bob Good Old Times. This is this is how Dr. Smith, Bob Smith, how would you like to be sponsored by one of the founders? No, you wouldn't. This is Bob Smith doing a 12-step call on Clarence the Brewmaster, one of the first guys in AA who had probably one of the largest groups in Cleveland, Star of Cleveland. Dr. Smith came in later and took over. He sat on the edge of my bed and said, "Well, what do you think of all this?" Then he paused and looked at me doubtfully. "I don't know if you're ready yet. You're kind of young." I was down to 135 pounds, no job, no clothes, no money. I didn't know how much more ready I could be, recalled Clarence. Still, I had to convince them that I was ready. They weren't begging him. He had to convince them they were ready. Then he asked, first question, doctor, first question. Do you believe in God? What does that have to do with it? Everything. I guess I do. Yes, nothing. Either you do or you don't. Yes, I do. That's fine. Dr. Bob replied. Now we're getting somewhere. All right, get out of bed and on your knees. We're going to pray. Sounds like my sponsor, John Glenn. I don't know how to pray. I guess you don't, but that's all right. Just follow what I say, and that will do for now. I did what I was ordered to do. There weren't any suggestions. Dr. Bob was always positive about his faith, Clarence said. If someone asked him a question about the program, his usual response was, what does it say in the good book, in the Bible? Suppose he was asked, what's all this first things first about? Dr. Bob would be ready with the appropriate quotation, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto him. So you tell me what they were doing, what you're doing in A now, that's thoroughly according to what they were doing. So I was in a meeting today, and some guy said, and I've heard this a million times, so many times I've heard this. And he said, if they had said anything about the God thing when I walked in, I would have left. And I always have, I'm an attorney, so I always, I want to cross-examine. I'm not going to have time for Leo's story. I want to cross-examine them. And no cross-talk or anything like that, but I would cross-examine some people if I could get a hold of them. I was want to ask him these questions. He said, I would have left. I said, how do you know? I mean, really, how do you know? I mean, I came into AA, I was ready. You could have told me, we're sacrificing a baby tonight. I said, okay, I'm not going anywhere. I don't want to drink, I mean, I don't even know. How do you really know you would have left? How do you know what you really would have done 10 years ago? Because they probably were talking about God. And you didn't, they probably, you know what I mean? But how do you really know? But then the second question would be this. Because maybe because we have a lot of people coming in today and they're not ready. It says if you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready. Maybe a lot of people come, they're not ready. They don't want what we have, they want what they had. They want what they used to have. Or they want what we have, but they're not willing to go to any length to get it. They're willing to walk out. They're willing to walk out if you mention God. They're not ready. But what we do? We don't do what they did back in 1937. We say, well, it doesn't matter whether you're ready or not. We're begging you to come in here anyway. You'll figure it out in 10 to 20 years or you'll die and drink. It says, we'll just let you figure it out. We're not going to do what Dr. Bob did. We're not going to do what Bill Wilson, because we're so worried about what you think about us. You understand? We wouldn't want to hurt your feelings. You understand? Thinking that we're doing the right thing because we're being kind, and what we're really doing is being cruel. But anyway, so the next question I want to ask him when he says, well, I would have left, I say this is my question. Great. Where would you go? No, I just want to know where would you go? I mean, you came in because you couldn't stop drinking, you had a drink bar. Where would you go? And then they'll tell you, I would have gone back to my house, I would have gone to my mother's house, I would have gone back to work, would have gone back to the bar. And he says, then I'd say this, well, how long do you think it would take you to get back here? You think how would that work for you? Well, maybe they'll be honest. They'll say, well, things weren't going so good. I probably would have come back. I said, well, when you came back, what if they were still talking about that God thing? What would you have done? Oh, so you would have come back with like a different attitude. You would have come back willing. Maybe that's why they had a different sort of less attrition back then. You know what I mean? They used to call them low-bottom drunks, but they weren't so much low-bottom drunks where they were people that really wanted this thing so much that they were willing to do whatever they had to do. Whereas now we have 95% of people that are willing to do some of this stuff, just not to drink, but not willing to do everything so they could lose fear. Not willing to do everything so they could lose fear. So now we have an organization where we used to have an organization where everybody in the organization, nobody rolled their eyes about the God thing because everybody understood that's what this thing was all about, and that's what the meetings were all about. That's sort of like why I like Bible study or some of the meetings I go to that are God-focused, because you can talk freely about the stuff, nobody's rolling their eyes or saying stupid stuff, but nowadays in AA, the bottom line is people walk around and they worry about, they censor themselves because they don't want to be canceled. So what they do is they don't talk about the most important thing in Alcoholics Anonymous, the thing that'll actually keep you sober. Nobody talks about it because we all know, it's an it's an unwritten rule in AA. Don't talk too much about God because you're fucking murdering newcomers. You're like killing bunny rabbits. Now, if I'm an atheist, I can say I'm an atheist and I don't believe in God. I think it's all bullshit. I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. That's okay. Even though it says in the big book, this sort of thinking has to be abandoned, nobody will stand up and say, we don't want to hear that crap because you're killing people. And that's not AA. AA is against atheism. We won't say that because he might get mad at us. And we're all chicken shit anyway, you know what I mean? Because nobody has any courage. So if people say they're atheists or agnostic, we don't call them on that. But God, if you mention God, you're going to get the shit beat out of you by some old timer. They're going to take you in the back and say, you're talking too much about God. You're murdering newcomers. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about what I just read you. Think about what's going on here. Now, here's the good news. The good news is that some people have figured this out. I just want you to know, I'm not the only guy. I mean, man, I never heard this crap before. They don't talk about this in my group. Well, I can tell you this. They talk about this stuff in every group I belong to. The groups I hang out, this is what we talk about. So I want you to know, there is a group in AA, it's not the not drinking group. There are groups of people in AA that live to talk about this stuff and are craving this kind of stuff. Because God will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. And that's what that's the beginning. The third step is the mere beginning of this deal. But that's where it leads to. Okay, that's all I have to say.